This morning, I'm going to be sharing with you this topic, in Dhamma, which is, of course, is a very important component, and a foundation, in our practice of the Dhamma, in our spiritual path, which is actually Sila, or what is translated. It's a Pali term, a Pali word, and is translated as virtue, or morality. Okay. And for this Dhamma sharing, I'm going to be actually sharing with you some interesting observations with regard to Sila, as evidence from the Pali canon, and we try to compare this with some of the common popular notions or views that we have, perhaps that we learn from time to time about Sila, and then we try to compare this against what is actually being spoken by our Blessed One, in the Pali canon, it's, more specifically in the Sutta Nikayas. Okay. So, as you know, this Sila constitutes a very pivotal, and also a very important foundation and component in our spiritual practice, practice of the Dhamma, as we thread the spiritual path, as taught by the Blessed One. As you know, this Sila, constitutes a very, very important component on which, the spiritual practice and spiritual values are built upon. As you know, for the monastics, the path of the practice can actually be encapsulated by way of what I'm sure all of you know, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Okay, but for lay people like us, the practice of the Dhamma, is actually can be actually summarized, by this Dana, Sila, and Bhavana. So if you actually look at the two path of practice of the monastics and also the lay people, we can see that there's a common denominator, which is actually Sila, Sila, which is morality, that is actually the very foundation, So for monastics, we know that this, the guarding, and the keeping of this Sila by the monastics, can actually be encapsulated, in the Vinaya, the Patimokkha. The Patimokkha has actually about 227 rules, which the monastics need to actually observe. The monks, and of course, if you look at the Vinaya as a whole, it's like thousands and thousands of rules, that the monks need to observe. That is actually under, it's all captured under this component of Sila for the monastics, And then this actually begs the next question, for lay people like us, So what is the path of practice for keeping Sila for lay people, When it comes to, say, observing Sila by the lay people, what do you think, that we should practice, as lay people in respect of Sila? I'm sure most of you will probably ask, why do you actually ask this very simple question? It's a bit puzzling, right? Because for lay people, I'm sure all of you will say, oh, of course it's the 5 precepts. What else, In the puja we do every day, we recite the 5 precepts. We just what we did just now, when we did the puja, we also recited the 5 precepts. That we dedicate this place, to the observance of 5 precepts. So of course for lay people it's 5 precepts. What else, I'm sure the popular notion is for lay people, 5 precepts is good enough, okay? So maybe, we can actually then go back to the suttas and actually then have a look, pose this question to the Buddha and see what the Buddha has actually explained, in the discourses, right, from the Pali canon, okay? So that is actually one of the things I'm going to cover. And of course, if you look at it, like I mentioned just now, for lay people is Dana, Sila, and Bhavana, right? This is actually our path of practice for lay people. So the next question is, Dana and Sila, right? Okay, before we go to Bhavana, right? Dana and Sila. So between Dana and Sila, maybe I could just ask you a question. Which do you think is more important? Is it Dana that's more important or Sila that's more important, in the practice? Oh, okay, Sila is more important. Then the question is, if you just practice Dana alone, but you don't observe your Sila well, or it's not impeccable, does it necessarily mean that if you do a lot of dana, by making a lot of offerings to the monks, in doing charity, being generous, would that itself necessarily enable you, to be reborn in favorable destinations and not fall into woeful planes? That's the question. That means you do a lot of dana, but in terms of sila, you are less, you're actually less well practiced in terms of sila, but you do a lot of dana. Would that person, actually, will he be guaranteed that he'll be reborn in the favorable existence and not fall into the three woeful planes? So that is the next question. But the reverse is also applicable. What happens if somebody who keeps the sila very well, but doesn't practice dana? So that is the question that also that we also need to ask ourselves. And maybe from the sutta, we might just want to see what the Buddha actually explains, in terms of importance of dana and sila. What if somebody does a lot of dana but doesn't keep sila well? What will the destination be? And what if somebody keeps the sila well but doesn't actually practice dana? He's not generous, but he is just well conducted in terms of his virtue, but he doesn't do much of dana. Which is also quite commonplace. When we actually observe, especially in certain say Buddhist communities, in other countries, they are more concerned about meditation, about sila, but they are not so interested about dana. They find dana is something not so critical for them. So we also need to also assess that in terms of dana and sila as well. So okay, so in terms of this sila, as I explained just now, sila is actually something that's very important, and I'd just like to also share with you what the Buddha says specifically in respect of this practice of sila, and why is it important that we should actually guard our sila, impeccably and also assiduously, because it's something that's very important, that while we are in the human realms, actually the choice is in our hands, how we actually want to conduct ourselves. Okay, whether you want to actually elevate, to more favorable destinations, even transcend beyond, favorable destinations, and then get out of samsara, and attain arahantship, or whether you just want to you're okay, with descending to the woeful plains, and continue, to linger around in samsara. Well, the choice is yours, Okay, let's go back to what the Buddha actually says specifically. Firstly, I'd just like to share with you this sutta from AN 2.18, where this sutta, is actually entitled categorically. And there was this occasion where, Venerable Ananda actually, went to see the Blessed One, and of course, after there was this conversation, with the Blessed One, and then the Buddha actually tells this Brahma Ananda, the Buddha says, I say categorically, Ananda, that bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct should not be done. That's what the Buddha actually tells Brahma Ananda. And then this Brahma Ananda actually responded by saying, given that the Blessed One, has actually said that misconduct by body, speech, and mind should not be done. What drawbacks, what sort of consequences can one expect when one and doing, what should not be done? When you actually break the precepts, and you do and you do something that should not be done, what is the consequence and drawback? And then the Buddha says, so these are the drawbacks that one can expect when doing something that should not be done. One can find fault with oneself. Observant people, will criticize and censure one, and one's bad reputation gets spread about. One dies confused, and upon the breakup of the body after death, one reappears in the plane of deprivation, and bad destination in the lower realm. So the Buddha has actually sounded this bell of warning to us that if you actually do misconduct, by body, speech, and mind, this is what you're going to this is what will befall upon you. When you're still here in the current world. The Buddha says that you will be criticized and censured by the wise, and then you find that you will actually you find fault with yourself. I mean, sometimes you when you think about the things you have done, then this guilt starts to well up in you, and say, oh, I should have done it. Why did I ever do such a thing? I should have done it. So these sort of things, the guilty conscience will actually, surface in yourself, especially at the last moment of death. This is actually where the video will start replaying, all the things that you have done, and that's where, you start to have fear, you start to have uncertainty, what's going to happen. You see a lot of images, that actually correspond with these deeds that you have done. And true enough, the Buddha says, break out of the body after death, your consciousness actually then is propelled by this bad karma to another new nama rupa, in a bad destination, either as a afflicted spirit, as a hungry ghost, peta, or in the animal realm, or even in hell, it's because the karmic energy is there, it propels you like a rocket to the next destination. Your consciousness is being driven, to the next namarupa, like what we see the paticca samuppada, where we actually have the ignorance itself, causing this sankhara, right? And sankhara itself actually, is the condition for consciousness, and consciousness is a condition for what? Nama rupa, right? So that's why this consciousness, will actually get driven, like a rocket to the next destination, depending on the nature of your karma, So if you actually breach your precept, then you bring you to a lower destination, a nama rupa that corresponds with the deed that you've done. So that's what the Buddha says here. You have to be very careful. You should not do bodily misconduct, misconduct by body, speech, and mind. And the Buddha says you should actually perform good bodily conduct, good conduct by body, speech, and mind. Where the Buddha continues to say that if you do that, if you do these wholesome actions after death, one reappears in the good destination in the heavenly world, and even in this current world, you will be praised, by the wise, and your good reputation spreads about, So that is the first sutta that we actually, need to actually be aware of, And second, the sutta also, I want to also highlight to you this sutta from Itivuttaka, sutta number 76. Then the Buddha actually says this. So Itivuttaka is actually is a collection of the sayings of the Buddha. This Itivuttaka, and sutta number 76. If you read what the Buddha says here, it says, aspiring to these three forms of bliss. A wise person should guard his virtue, which three, may praise come to me, may wealth come to me, a wise person should guard his virtue, and at the breaker of the body after death, may I reappear in a good destination, If you want to have these three wishes come true, means may praise come to me, and may wealth come to me, and upon death, upon the breakup of my body, may I reappear in a good destination. If you want to have these three wishes come true, then the Buddha, the Arahant, says that a wise person should guard his virtue. That means you should actually guard your virtue. Guard your virtue. Assiduously and impeccably. At all times. Be mindful. Always guard in terms of what you say, what you do, what you say, and what you think. In terms of your sankhara is very important, your intention, whenever it comes up in your mind, you have to actually reflect it like a mirror, watch it, see what appears in you, and whether you should do it or not. That is something that the Buddha says, I must guard your virtue at all times. Even if, the Buddha says here, even if you do no evil, but you seek out one who does, you are suspected of evil, your bad reputation grows. This is what the Buddha says, even if you're somebody who doesn't actually do unwholesome deeds and you actually guard your virtue, but you actually seek the company, and the companion of those who don't guard their virtue well, and these are the people who have no qualms, about doing unwholesome deeds, and you actually seek companion with them. The Buddha says a person like this is just like wrapping a rotting fish in a blade of kusa grass, makes the grass smelly, So this is what this Buddha says. If you mix around with the wrong company, then you are just like wrapping the kusa grass with a rotting fish. So the grass also smells, has this foul smell, right? But if you actually seek companion with those who are of good virtue, good morality, then it's like a man who wraps powdered incense, in the leaf of a tree, and makes the leaf fragrant. So it is that you should seek out, you seek out the enlightened and those who are well practiced. So again, you know, the Buddha actually sounded this very important message for us, lah. Okay, so next, remember the question I asked you, you know, in terms of whether dana or sila is important. Okay, so here I just want to share with you this sutta, you know, from AN 10.177, where it records a discussion between the Blessed One and this Brahmin called Janu Sonin. You know, this Janu Sonin is very rich Brahmin. One day, you know, he was actually riding this horse, you know, with a lot of the white stallions, you know, and white chariot, you know. Also, you know, so you know, he was actually riding, and he was actually going to the to see the Buddha, you know, and then there was this conversation, you know, between the Buddha and this Brahmin Janu Sonin, and this Brahmin Janu Sonin actually asked the question Buddha about a lot of questions. I think he was asking the Buddha about, for example, you know, when we make offerings, when your relative passes away, you know, should you actually make food offerings to these departed relatives, you know, because like nowadays we find, you know, some Buddhists actually say, oh, it's actually very un-Buddhistic to actually make offerings to the departed relatives, you know. You should actually just make merits and transfer merits to the departed ones, you know. But if you look at this sutta, right, the Buddha actually talks about, you know, we're talking about food offerings, the physical food offerings here. The Buddha says that you should make food offerings, you know, because if your relatives is reborn as a peta, you know, then this peta is actually around us, you know, and you do not know, but this peta is around us, and he is actually able to partake of the food that you offer, you know. But of course, if your relative is reborn as a deva, as a human being, as an animal, or in the hell, you know, as a human being or as a deva, of course they will not be able to partake of this food offering, because they don't even know that you have made the offering, right? You know, but if this person is reborn as a peta, then this peta, you know, very likely he's still around you, because there's this clinging to you, you know. So that's why he becomes a peta, you know. So the Buddha says you should actually make food offerings so that this peta can actually partake of the food. So the petas do actually eat the food, you know. But when this, of course, this Janu Sonin said, what happens if all my relatives are all well practiced and they're reborn in the Deva realm, but no, they are none actually reborn in the Petas? Then the Buddha says, it's still okay, you know, because if you make offerings, there have been many relatives in your past lives who are still lingering around you, you know, and they are still seeking your food offerings, you know. So the Buddha says, you should make food offerings. So that's why in this sutta, the Buddha says even if you make food offerings, you know, and even if the person does not partake, this deceased person does not partake of the food, you still actually gain merits, you know, because that's why the Buddha says, if you do a lot of dana, that's why the Buddha says, he brings this, the Buddha actually brings this example that if this person does a lot of dana, for example, he offers a lot of the allowable requisites to the monks, you know, in terms of robes, you know, food, you know, medicine and lodging, you know, but this person doesn't observe his sila, you know, and for example, he does a lot of this unwholesome livelihood, you know, in terms of breaking the precepts, you know, doing a lot of this black business, you know, for example, businesses which are actually illegal, smuggling, you know, doing a lot of this human smuggling and all this, you know. But because of that, he's very rich, right, you know. But so he thinks maybe I can actually compensate all the bad things I've done from my unwholesome livelihood. I can do more dana so that I can offset, right, you know. A lot of people think that, right, can offset. But the Buddha says no, you know. If you look at this sutta, the Buddha says if you actually do a lot of these bad deeds because of your job, you know, and you know, and you want to compensate it, you know. So with the breakup of the body, the Buddha says here, if the breakup of the body, you actually get reborn as a what? You actually reborn as a royal elephant or royal stallion, you know, or even a royal horse, royal stallion, you know, maybe in the palace, you know, where you actually get a lot of luxuries, you know, because of the dana you have done. But because of the deed or the unwholesome livelihood you have done, you don't keep your sila, you know, you break your precepts, you know. Because of that, you're actually reborn, as animals, in the woeful plains, But because of the dana you have done, you actually receive a lot of this pampering, luxurious food, maybe as a pet dog and a pet cat, where you actually receive, luxurious lives, much better than, some even most people, some common people, they have all the nice bed and nice food, and manicure and pedicure or whatever, and shampooing, but they are still animals. Because why? Because they don't observe their sila, So don't think that you can actually offset your bad, your unwholesome sila by doing dana, Each one will take its corresponding result, just like the bright and the dark karma that Buddha speaks about. Don't think that they offset each other. They don't. It doesn't work like math where you offset each other. Each one will actually produce its corresponding results. So this sutta is actually very, very important, but it's also very interesting. Okay. And then the next one. The other thing, remember I gave you the example. What if somebody actually observe his sila well but doesn't do dana? He actually observe his 5 precepts very well, but doesn't do dana at all, and it's not generous. So here, just to share with you this sutta from AN 5.31. It actually records this interesting conversation between this princess called Sumana. Sumana is a princess, and one day she with her retinue of all the 500 chariots, and the 500 court girls, and all the other guards, they actually went to see the Buddha, and this Princess Sumana, actually, she wanted to ask the Buddha, a question about this. This Princess Sumana asked Buddha, and said, here, Bhante, there might be 2 disciples of the Blessed One. These 2 disciples, lay people, one equal in faith, virtuous behavior and wisdom. So this Princess Sumana is saying, there are these 2 lay people, and they are equal in terms of their sada, their faith, their sila as well. They observe their precepts well, and also their wisdom. They also have equal wisdom. But one is generous while the other one is not. So this princess asked the Buddha, with the breakup of the body after death, they would both be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. Definitely right, because they actually observe their 5 precepts well, and they actually have good sada, and they actually have this, faith in the Buddha, and they guard their virtue, very well. But one is generous, the other one doesn't. The other one does a lot of dana. The other one doesn't do dana at all. So with the breakup, or because of the good sila they practice, they are both reborn in the heavenly world, in the celestial realms, in the deva realm. So when they become devas, this princess asks, would there be any distinction or difference between them? Then the Buddha's response is, there would be, Sumana, the Blessed One said. The generous one, having become a deva, will surpass the other one, who doesn't do dana in 5 ways. In celestial lifespan, celestial beauty, celestial happiness, celestial glory, and celestial authority. The generous one, having become a deva, will surpass the other in 5 ways. So you see, so even if these 2 lay people, they have good sila and they are reborn in the deva realms, the one who does dana actually outshines the other one, in 5 ways, in terms of the glory, the splendor, in terms of the radiance, the beauty of this deva, is much more, than this one who doesn't do dana. And the authority of the deva, in the deva realm, each deva actually has got authority in terms of where they control their territory, So in terms of the celestial authority also, this one who does dana actually has got high authority. Just like Sakadeva Raja, he controls the kingdom, he's the king of the devas. So the one who does the dana, will be more blessed, in terms of these qualities. It's more resplendent, more glorious devas compared to the one maybe less shiny, and also maybe in terms of the celestial lifespan also maybe shorter. But this one who does dana, the lifespan is very, very long, So then the Princess Sumana says, but Bhante, if these 2 devas pass away from the celestial realms and come back again as human beings, means that their good karma is exhausted. Just like, our car petrol already exhausted. You need to come back again, refuel. And this Princess Sumana said, when they become human beings again, would there still be any differences between them? Then the Buddha says, yes, there would be. The Buddha says, when they become human beings again, the generous one will surpass the other one in 5 ways as well: in human lifespan, human beauty, human happiness, human fame, and human authority. So can you imagine here the good effects of the dana continue to linger on, continue to support this person who does a lot of dana, and in 5 ways, in terms of lifespan, the beauty, authority, the fame, this person who does a lot of dana, actually, has got these 5 ways, which surpass the other one who doesn't do good. And then this Princess Sumana again asked the Buddha, Bhante, if these 2 persons, having come back to the human world again from the Dewa realm, if these 2 should go forth from the household life and they become monks, they renounce, and they become monks, and they go forth into the homeless, they go forth from the household life into the homeless life, So this princess asked the Buddha, would there still be distinction between the 2 monks, these 2 Bhantes? Then the Buddha says, yes, there would be, Sumana. The generous one, having gone forth, will surpass the other one in 5 ways. He will usually get a monk's robe that is specifically offered to him, and seldom the one that is not offered to him. Means he will have a lot of good supporters giving him a lot of robes. And then without him asking, he will actually get very good support in terms of alms food. People will offer alms food in reverence to him. He doesn't even have to, he seldom takes alms food that's not offered to him. And he has got great support in terms of people offering alms food to him, and he actually gets offer to actually stay at lodgings, places, without without even indicating anything, all these will actually be given to him, and the support, is actually very good, and also he gets medicine and provisions, whenever he's not well, he actually gets, good support in terms of medicine and provision, and his fellow monastics would actually treat him very well, and behave in very agreeable ways towards him, and seldom in disagreeable ways. They will usually present him what is agreeable, and seldom with what is disagreeable. So you can see that now, that these 2 persons who have actually gone forth, the one who has done a lot of dana actually is blessed, in terms of getting the allowable requisites more readily, being offered to him, and he actually gets great support as compared to one who doesn't do dana, and maybe he actually gets less support, and the support isn't actually, very strong, or very well supported, That's why this Princess Sumana actually exclaimed, he says, it's astounding, it's amazing, Bhante. Truly, one has good reason to give alms and do meritorious deeds, since this will be helpful for one if one becomes a Dewa, again becomes a human, or goes forth. So the supporting energy coming from this Dewa, is actually persists from the time you have done it, all the way when you become a Dewa, become a human, and after you have gone forth, as into the homeless life, the Buddha, this the strong, wholesome, karmic energy that you have actually planted by doing dana, continues to follow you, life after life, as a Dewa, as a human, as a monk, That's why the Bhante says, this Buddha says, so it is, Sumana, so it is, Sumana. Truly, one has good reason to give alms and do meritorious deeds, since they will be helpful if one becomes a Dewa, again becomes a human, or goes forth. So that's why from here we can see, that even if you got your Sila well, please remember to also do dana and do, a lot of wholesome deeds. That will actually be your supporting energy. This will be your your requisites, as you travel through samsara, just like when you go on a long journey, you must have your passport, you must have your cash, these are, and you must have all the provisions with you when you go on a long journey, Otherwise, you're going to, have a lot of suffering, as you go through, samsara, with all these, with no sufficient requisites to support you. So this sutta again is very important, This Princess Sumana, AN 5.31, again, it tells you the importance between dana and sila, So that's why, as we can see here, dana and sila are equally important, okay? So the next area that I also want to touch on is actually the other question I ask you, remember, I ask you, for lay people, what is the sila that we should practice? Is it sufficient to practice only 5 precepts, okay? So for this, I just want to share some suttas with you so that we can do a compare and contrast, In AN 7.6, this sutta called Dana Sutta, Dana Sutta is actually called treasure. Dana is treasure. And the Buddha actually talks about these 7 treasures. What are these 7 treasures? The treasures of conviction, saddha, treasure of virtue, treasure of conscience and concern, hiri ottappa. Conscience is, hiri ottappa, the fear of doing unwholesome, and the treasure of listening, treasure of generosity, and treasure of discernment, which is wisdom. So the Buddha actually classifies these 7 things as what? The treasures that you should actually cultivate. So one of the 7 treasures is treasure of virtue, which is our sila, And here, the Buddha actually asks the monks, you say, what is the treasure of virtue? You read here, it's very interesting. The Buddha actually says, this is the case where a disciple of the noble ones abstains from what? From taking life, from killing, from stealing, from sensual misconduct, illicit sexual conduct, which is sensual misconduct, abstain from lying, abstain from taking intoxicants that cause heedlessness. So in this sutta, the Buddha actually talks about the 5 precepts, right? The 5 precepts is actually, very important, especially for lay people, to observe the 5 precepts. Okay, again, in this Sigalovada Sutta, Digha Nikaya 31, the long discourses 31, I'm sure this sutta is very, very popular. Everybody knows about this Sigalovada, who is actually a young householder's son. His father passed away, and before his father passed away, he asked his son, this young Sigala, to actually pay respect every day after taking his morning bath, to pay respect in the 6 directions, the north, south, east, west, and also the top, and the bottom, the nadir and the zenith, So one day, the Blessed One actually saw this Sigala, actually doing this, and he actually asked Sigala, what are you doing, by bowing to the 6 directions? Then he said, this is what my father actually asked me to do, just bow in the 6 directions. So since my father asked me to do it, I just do it, So the Buddha says, actually, when you bow to the 6 directions, you should actually remember, these teachings which I teach you in terms of this, the importance of bowing to the 6 directions. And here, you see, the Buddha actually tells this Sigala, this in terms of the precepts, the virtue, the Buddha, it's so important. The Buddha starts by virtue, So virtue is very important. The Buddha starts by actually speaking about what? About the importance actually of observing your sila. The Buddha says, you should actually abstain from killing, stealing, adultery, this sensual misconduct and lying, and of course the Buddha also continues to say that you should not actually indulge in intoxicants. So you see, the Buddha also talks about what the 5 precepts here, right? Okay. So again, these suttas actually talk about what 5 precepts. 5 precepts. So, and of course, from AN 8.39, again, this sutta, if you read this sutta, the Buddha talks about the 8 merits. Okay, so I just summarize it. For the 8 merits, actually, the 3 actually is by taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And then the other 5 merits, the 5 rewards of merit actually is what? Observing your 5 precepts, This AN 8.39, the Buddha again talks about you should avoid killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, taking of lying. And lying, actually, I also must clarify, lying, it must be actually intentional lying, means there must be deliberate lie. It must be a deliberate lie, If you say something that's false, under the wrong impression that is right, it is not breaking the precept of lying, because some people actually say that, you say, because you say something that's false, right? And therefore you actually break the precept. It's not true. But then the question now is, the person who actually spoke that statement was under the impression that it was correct. So actually, he did not break the precept because he did not actually utter a deliberate lie. He was under the impression that it was correct. That's why he said it. But if you find that later on that statement that he said is wrong or false, then you cannot accuse him of actually saying, oh, you break a precept because you tell a lie. But the question now is, that person was under the impression that that statement was correct. So to fulfill this condition of breaking the precept, it must be a deliberate lie. Something that you knew it was false, but you continue to say it, for your own benefit, for your own advantage. That's where it breaks the precepts, but not otherwise. So that point must be clarified. And of course, taking of intoxicants as well. So here in this sutta, the Buddha talks about 3 plus 5, the 5 rewards of merits, which are actually happiness that lead to celestial realm, you see. So the Buddha in this 8.39 talks about the 5 precepts, okay? So you see, it's very interesting. The Buddha actually gives different, various versions of Sila, And okay, now we have already seen 5 precepts, right? But if you look at AN 8.40, okay, the Buddha actually talks about this Vipaka Sutta. Vipaka is result, right? Okay, for a karma you have done, when the karma ripens, it results in Vipaka. So this Vipaka Sutta, here, interestingly, the Buddha talks about what? The Buddha actually talks about 8 precepts, the 8 aspects of observing or Sila. I mean, it's 8 precepts, but not our Uposatha Sila. This is the 8 precepts. The Buddha talks about you should not take life, because if you take life, if you do killing, you lead to the 3 woeful planes, and once you become a human being again, once your bad karma has been exhausted, when you come back as a human being again, you will have a short lifespan. Then the Buddha says you should not steal, because steal will lead you to woeful planes, and then when you become a human, it leads to loss of one's wealth. And then sensual misconduct also, you lead you to animal realm and all this, woeful planes. And then when you come back again, it leads to rivalry and revenge. So it means people like to take revenge on you, and you have a lot of rivals. They actually want to compete with you. They always want to find fault with you, and they want to take revenge on you. Why? Because you have actually broken, other people's relationship before, who are actually harmonious husband and wife, but you break their relationship through adultery, and you yourself have to bear that, when you come back again. You have a lot of difficulties in your relationship, you have a lot of rivalries, people take revenge on you, they are jealous of you, they want to take revenge on you, So that is also because of what you have done in the past. And telling falsehood as well, it leads you to all this animal realm, and then when you come back again, you always, and when you come back again, you're always falsely accused, for something you haven't done, but because of circumstantial evidence, you are being falsely accused. And then you see the Buddha here, interestingly, the Buddha does here, it doesn't stop at just musavada. The Buddha continues to talk about what? Divisive tale bearing, which is actually being slanderous speech, malicious speech. Means you carry tale around, and you backstab others. So you slander others, what you hear from somebody, you go and tell somebody, hey, do you know this so-and-so actually, says this, and you try to create discord among people who are good friends, and then this person, and some people actually say, what's wrong with me telling, about this, this is exactly what he said, all right, and I'm actually not breaking my musavada, it's actually true. This is what I heard, he said something bad about you, and most people will say that, my responsibility as a Buddhist is just to observe the 5 precepts and nothing more. So even if I go and tell tale, if I slander others, if I malicious speech, if I go and tell, backstab others, it's okay because I'm telling the truth and nothing but the truth, so I'm not breaking the precept. But please be careful, The Buddha again in this sutta says that if you do this divisive tale bearing, you are actually breaking your precept in terms of your speech as well. So this pisuna vacha is something very, very dangerous. And then the next one, the Buddha says harsh speech, parusa vacha. This harsh speech, is also something very, we need to also take note that we should not actually utter harsh speech that is actually vulgar, there's actually, lead to a lot of this, you quarrel and it's very vulgar, very harsh, you break people's feelings, and you don't care and you just utter harsh speech in anger, and the Buddha says, this will also lead you to the woeful plains, and when you come back again, you always hear unappealing sounds, for some reason you always hear a lot of these unappealing sounds because of what you have utter harsh speech yourself. And then the Buddha also talks about what? Frivolous chattering, sampa palapa, means you always like to talk about a lot of nonsensical things, a lot of gossip about others, especially during lunch, right? I'm sure this is the common favorite activity of people who go for lunch with your colleagues, right? Start talking about, hey, you know that this boss, is so terrible, so hopeless, don't even know this and that, blah blah blah, and then you tend to indulge in this gossiping during lunchtime, so be careful. This Buddha also says this frivolous chattering, and it's not in accordance with the Dhamma, and you are actually degrading other people, talking. If you're gossiping about good things, never mind, wow, such and so, wow, he has done so well, and he's so talented, so quick-witted, all this is still okay, but I'm sure most people will not talk about good things, during lunchtime, is gossiping. They will actually more interesting to bring up all the unfavorable things, gossiping about others' shortfalls and misgivings, then others also chip in, and then if you don't chip in, you also feel a bit strange that how come you're not participating in this gossiping, and you just keep quiet, so you also feel very compelled to also be part of the the gossiping, so it's also, you have to be very careful, this gossiping alone, the Buddha says is also one of the precepts that you break that will lead you to the woeful plains, and then when you come back again, it leads to words that are worth taking to heart. It means you always hear a lot of these nonsensical words being spoken about, to you, all the nonsensical things, things which you don't want to hear, you keep on hearing, and doesn't actually contribute to what you need to know or to help you. You keep hearing a lot of these nonsensical and unhelpful words being spoken to you, and the last one, the eighth one, the Buddha says the drinking of fermented and distilled liquor. This is the Suramiraya. So the Buddha says you must abandon this. You must make sure that you try to abandon this. You must abandon to actually take these intoxicants, because the Buddha says it's something that will lead to hell, to animal realm as well as hungry shades, and when you come back again as a human being, it leads to mental derangement, So when you actually indulge in taking a lot of these wines, intoxicants, people say, well, wine is very good, it's very good for you, blood circulation and whatnot, so be careful. The Buddha says you should not even try, to drink this distilled and fermented liquor, because if you indulge in it, it leads you to the woeful plains. When you come back as a human, you have a lot of mental, psychotic problems, and you'll be saddled with mental derangement. So you see, the Buddha in this sutta, is very interesting. He didn't stop just on musavada, but he actually adds on another three, right? In terms of slanderous speech, harsh speech, and frivolous chattering. So 3 by action, 4 by speech, and then plus taking of intoxicants. So 3 plus 4 plus 1 is 8, right? So we have another variation of Sila here. Earlier was just 5, but now it's 8. Okay. Then if you look at the other sutta, right? Okay, MN 41. MN 41, you see, this is a Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha actually was touring, among the Kosalans, and the Kosalan kingdom, and then he came to a village called the Sala kingdom, village, and the people in this village, Sala, they heard about, the good reputation of the Buddha, they all thronged to see the Buddha, so wow, the Buddha, is a perfectly self-awakened one, he's an Arahant, endowed with knowledge and the right conduct, with so much of power, and he teaches the Dhamma that's so lovely in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, and they all went to see the Buddha, and they asked the Buddha, and if you read section I highlighted in yellow here, the Buddha's, they asked the Buddha, now what is the cause of good Gautama, because they know Buddha by the name of Gautama. He say, what is the cause, good Gautama, what is the reason, why some beings here, upon the breaking of the body, arise in a sorrowful state, in a bad destination, and even in the hell, the niraya, in hell. And what is the cause, what is the reason, good Gautama, why some beings, here at the breakout of the body after dying, arise, in a heavenly, in a celestial realm, And of course, then the Buddha says, the person who goes to hell is because, and all the bad destinations, because he does not behave or does not conduct himself, in accordance with what the Dhamma, and those who actually go to heaven because they conduct themselves in accordance with the Dhamma, So then the villager say, I don't understand what you mean by in accordance and not in accordance with the Dhamma. Then the Buddha says, what is in accordance, what is not in accordance with the Dhamma is actually when you do actually these 10 actions. Okay, the Buddha says, when this person actually commits a killing, then he actually steals, and then he actually commits sensual misconduct. The Buddha means he actually has all these sexual relationship, with those under protection, and those who already have spouses, So the Buddha explains this, 1, 2, and 3. So the Buddha starts by saying, not in accordance with the Dhamma is actually 3 actions by body, and then the Buddha continues to say, then there are 4 actions by speech, which is what was explained earlier in terms of telling of lies, slanderous speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, and also in terms of gossiping, frivolous speech. So by speech is actually 4. Even though our tongue is the smallest organ compared to all, but it actually is capable of doing 4, compared to the 3, by our body. And then in terms of our mind, the Buddha says, the Buddha continues to actually add on 3. The Buddha says, if you actually have this covetousness, means you actually covet against other people's properties. See, for example, you know that somebody has inherited, this wealth, great amount of wealth, maybe your siblings or your friends or what. Then you actually contemplate, I want to actually get my hands on those wealth. I want to actually take over what you have. I want to take over all the riches and the wealth you have, all the belongings, and to the extent, some also they also contemplate that they want to take over the spouse of other people, to the extent, nowadays it happens, they look at the other people's spouse. I want to actually, take over your spouse, take over your properties, your wealth. This is what the Buddha says, covetousness. It means that you covet, and then you go and pre-plan all the things you want to do in order to achieve the objective of getting your hands on those properties and and belongings of others. So if you do this, this energy is potent enough for you to be reborn in the woeful plains. And then the next one is what? The next one is actually this malevolence. Means this ill will is not just the normal anger you experience. It's a very, very potent anger and very, very potent malevolence that you have against someone. You hope that may this person be killed. May this person be slaughtered. May he disappear from this surface of the earth. I don't see him again. Go and get rid of him. I hope he disappears. I hope he just disappears from this earth, and I hope that, may this person be killed, be destroyed. Sometimes, for example, you may be very unhappy with certain politicians, all the things that he has done. Oh my goodness, all the terrible things that he has done, that has, and betray our trust and all this. May he be killed, or may he be actually, may he be killed, in a plane crash or what, Wow, you have all these thoughts in you, so potent and so malevolent, that you hope somebody will be killed, So be careful, if you do this, then you are creating the potential to go to the woeful plains, And this Buddha says the third one is what? Wrong view, means you actually take the wrong, perverted view, thinking that there's no good result from offering, from making dana. There's no good results supporting the monks, you know, or supporting your parents. There's no merits at all, you know, and there's no rebirth, and actually there's no monastics who are actually practicing well, you know, who have actually achieved knowledge that is transcending the world, you know. So if you actually have these three items under your mind, in terms of covetousness, in terms of this ill will, the potent ill will, malevolence, and also in terms of this wrong view. The Buddha says that you're committing these three actions by mind, which will actually lead you to the woeful plains. So you see here, the Buddha actually talks about what? 10 unwholesome actions, right? What the Buddha says, the 10 ducharita, you know. So you see, 3 by body, 4 by speech, and 3 by mind. 3, 4, 3. So you see, in this sutta, the Buddha doesn't just talk about 5 precepts. You know, the Buddha actually tells the people of Sala that you must not do this 3, 4, 3. You know that if you do them, then you know you're creating the energy to be reborn in the woeful plains. You know, so you see here, the same thing goes for this. 10.177 just now also, you know, the Buddha, you know, when he actually tells Janu Sonin, you know, just now about the sutta, the Buddha also talks about these 10 unwholesome actions, 10, 3, 4, 3, okay? You can refer to this later. You see, the Buddha didn't just talk about the 10 ducharita only to the Sala, you know, the people in Sala. The Buddha also talked about the 3, 4, 3, 2 jarita also to the people of Ranja, you know. So at the time, the Buddha was actually staying in Savatthi in the Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's monastery, you know. And then at that time, there was a Brahmin householder called Vranja, you know, who actually came to Savatthi on some business. Then he went to see the Buddha, and then the Buddha also told this Brahmin Vranja, you know, about these 10 unwholesome actions. You know. So the Buddha didn't talk about just 5 precepts. You know, the Buddha talks about the 10 unwholesome actions. Same thing as what they told us people of Sala. You can refer to it, 3, 4, 3. And this is actually what Majjhima Nikaya 42, you know. Same thing also, you see, in MN 73, you know, there was also this wanderer called Vachagota, you know. Also, this Vachagota also asked the Buddha, you know, what are the unskilled actions that I should actually avoid, you know, so that I do not actually get into, you know, do something that's unwholesome, you know, and cause me trouble in the future, you know. Then the Buddha says, you must also make sure you prevent this 10 ducharita, which is 3 by body, 4 by speech, and 3 by mind. You see here the Buddha repeatedly told over and over again about this 10 ducharita, you know. So from here we can see, as lay people, the conclusion is that of course, the 5 precepts is actually what we recite during puja, and they actually form the core, the backbone, you know, of our sila, you know. But we should not just stop short of just practicing the 5 precepts. We must make sure that we actually guard our sila well, you know, guard our sense doors well, so that we do not actually commit any of the 10 unwholesome actions by 3 by body, 4 by speech, and 3 by mind. Okay, like what the Buddha said. Because if you just observe the 5 precepts alone, then like what I said, you know, some of them may actually self-justify by saying, oh, you know, I'm just telling the truth, not truth, but nothing but the truth, you know. But I can just go around, you know, slandering people, you know, or speaking ill of others, you know, causing discord, you know, give malicious speech, you know. But I'm not doing anything bad. I'm still actually observing my 5 precepts, because Musa Vada is true. You know, I didn't say anything false. So what's wrong? You know, I didn't break my 5 precepts. So, but if you read the suttas completely, you know, that's the Buddha actually didn't just stop at 5 precepts. The Buddha actually continues and actually speaks of the 10 ducharita. So when you read suttas, it's very important you actually read suttas of, you know, holistically, you know, from various suttas, so that you piece them together to find out what the Buddha actually said with regard to a certain topic. And you shouldn't just take one sutta alone and just, you know, jump into the conclusion that, oh, this is what the Buddha said. 5 precepts, just now the Buddha talks about just 5 precepts. So 5 precepts is enough. But if you read the suttas, you know, more holistically and more completely, and you actually, you know, piece the jigsaw puzzles together, then you find that, well, the Buddha actually didn't stop at just 5 precepts. The Buddha actually went on to talk about the 10 duccharitas and make sure, you you make sure you guide yourself, don't do the 2 jaritas. Otherwise, you may be actually following the wrong path. And you think that my Sila is well, but actually, you have committed a lot of unwholesome actions without you even knowing, And then another thing about Sila that I want to also highlight to you is actually from this SN 42.8. This is actually called the Sangha Sutta, the conch trumpet. This sutta is actually very important and also very interesting, because it actually records this conversation between this village head, like our Penghulu. His name is called Asibandaka, and he's actually like our Penghulu. So one day he actually went to see the Buddha, and he actually tells the Buddha, that, oh, I'm a disciple of this Niganta Nakaputta. Niganta Nakaputta is actually a very famous, of the Jains tradition. Until now, the Jains are still in India, right? But of course, they teach their teachings are different from what the Buddha actually taught. And here, the Buddha actually asked this Asibandaka Putta, so what does your teacher, this Niganta Nakaputta, teach, about observing the Sila, So then this Penghulu tells this Buddha, tells the Buddha, he says, whatever one keeps doing frequently, by that one is led to a state of rebirth, Then the Buddha says, if this is true, if you say that if you keep on doing something frequently, then it will lead you to a rebirth. Means, for example, if you actually commit stealing or killing or whatever, then you don't do it all the time. You only do it once, And does it mean that, if you go along this teaching, then nobody actually goes to hell or the awful plains, So actually, it's a very long sutta here, but what I'm trying to just highlight to you is, the Buddha says, if you actually follow this Niganta Nakaputta, and teaching, and where this Niganta actually teaches that if you commit any of the unwholesome actions, like you break the 5 precepts, right, and you keep thinking, oh, I've done something wrong already, so what am I, what's going to happen to me, and you feel very remorseful, you keep on thinking and you become very afraid, very scared, and you keep on harping on this thought that, oh, I've actually committed killing or stealing or sexual misconduct. Oh, I've done it. I'm going to hell. If this is actually going to, if I keep on thinking and harping on it, then true enough, the Buddha says, you will go to woeful plains. Okay, but the Buddha says, this is actually not how the noble disciple should actually conduct himself as far as this Sila is concerned. So you see here, this paragraph here, you see here, this paragraph which I say here. Okay, maybe I make it. See here, a disciple has faith in the teacher, and he reflects. I mean, this is different from the Buddha's disciple. This Buddha disciple, he knows that he has actually broken the five precepts, but he knows that this is not right. Okay, the Buddha actually, because this is contrary to what the Buddha has actually taught, right? So if I actually commit any of the 5 precepts, it's wrong. But he thinks, if I become remorseful for that reason, that evil deed of mine will not be undone. So which means, if you have done something bad in the past, we must actually contemplate. Even if I become really remorseful, because you become very, you have a lot of guilty conscience and remorseful. It's not going to help the situation. The evil deed that you have done will not be undone. Whatever is done is done. The unwholesome action will actually bring its fruit in time to come, But you must reflect, so therefore going forward, I shall abandon right here and now, the unwholesome deed which I have done, and I shall refrain from doing that in the future. Okay, this is what the Buddha says. This is my teaching of observing Sila. It's not by becoming remorseful, becoming very afraid, become very guilty, oh, I've done something wrong, and you keep on harping on it, keep on churning and churning in your mind. Oh, what's going to happen? I'm going to go to Bofu Plains. I'm going to go to hell. So what I'm going to do? If you keep on thinking this, and then at your deathbed, definitely it will happen to you, because your mind is really directed that way. But the Buddha says you shouldn't be like that. You should abandon, whatever you have done wrong, right here and right now, and refrain from doing it in the future. This is how there comes to be the abandoning of that evil deed. This is how there comes to be the transcending of that evil deed. So the Buddha says, whatever you have done wrong in the past, do not dwell on them, right here and right now, abandon it, start afresh, guard yourself well, and refrain from doing that action going forward. And this is where you abandon and you transcend over that evil deed going forward. So you see how wonderful the Buddha is. He said, whatever is past, don't dwell on it. Start afresh, go forward, and safeguard your Sila. This is what the Buddha tells this village, Punghulu. Okay, so I've already shared with you, these 5 precepts, and also the 10 Duccharitas. As lay people, you must also make sure that on Uposatha days, you also observe the 8 precepts. Okay. In the Buddha's time, this Uposatha Sila was actually very popular. People will actually go to the monasteries. They will actually observe the 8 precepts. They will be robed in white, and they will listen to the Dhamma, and they will practice. They will meditate. But nowadays, of course, I don't know why, but perhaps, in such modern times, in the times of internet, people are actually less keen to observe Uposatha. Only during retreats people observe 8 precepts. Other than that, we don't observe Sabbath. Because like other religions, people observe Sabbath on Sundays. But for Buddhists, for some reasons, we don't observe Sabbath anymore. But actually, for Buddhists, we do have Uposatha days, which are Sabbath days. So the Buddha actually encouraged lay people to observe, Sabbath, Uposatha days. So you can see there from AN 10.46, there was this occasion where the Buddha was actually staying near Kapilavatu, which is actually the Buddha's hometown, because it's Kapilavatu, and the Sakyan kingdom of this people of Sakyan race, right? So then this many of the Sakyan lay followers, they actually went to see the Buddha on the Uposatha day, this Sabbath day. So the Buddha actually asked them, Sakyans, do you observe the 8-facted Uposatha? Then these Sakyans responded by saying, sometimes we do, Bhante, sometimes we don't, And the Buddha actually tells them, it's of no gain to you, Sakyans, it's ill-gotten that in this life, so endangered by grief, in this life, so uncertain that death will happen anytime, you only observe the 8 precepts on Uposatha Sila, only sometimes, and sometimes you don't, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, So it's ill-gotten for you, it's ill-gotten, it's not good, The Buddha says you should not do that, You should observe it consistently on Sabbath days, So Sabbath days, you can see that from the Buddhist calendar. Of course, in the Thai forest tradition, Uposatha days usually fall on the lunar calendar of the 8th day, the 15th day, the 23rd day, and the 29th or the 30th day, which is the Uposatha Sabbath day, where Buddhists should observe this Uposatha Sila. So here for lay people, for Sila, we have recovered, 5 precepts, and then the Buddha also talked about the 8, the 3 plus 4 plus 1, taking intoxicants, and then the Duccarita, is 3 plus 4 plus 3, and then we also have the Uposatha Sila, of the 8 precepts, where you don't take food, at unsuitable times, after the solar noon, and you don't actually indulge in music, dancing, scents, garlands, and you actually sleep, on matted bed, So these are the 8 precepts that the Buddha encouraged us. So you see here in AN 10.212 again, the Buddha talks about this 10 Duccarita. So if you actually possess these 10 qualities, you commit the 10 Duccarita, one is deposited in hell as if brought there. So you have to be very careful. The Buddha says, again, the Buddha talks about this 10 Duccarita so many times in so many suttas, in the Pali Canon, that you cannot actually discount it as something that's a later addition. This is actually the original teaching of the Buddha, the very, very at the very, very original teaching, of the Buddha, based on the Pali Canon, as recorded. And as you can see here, it's actually repeated so many, many times about these 10 ducharitas. We have to be very careful. We take heed. And of course, the next question here is, what is the purpose of actually observing Sila? If you can see from this Sutta AM.11.1, actually, observing Sila, the Buddha says, is actually for the purpose of what? Purpose of mental cultivation. Why? You see, because once you have Sila, right? Then the Buddha says this will lead to joy. Because when you reflect, that I have committed, I have not committed any of the 10 wholesome actions. I've guarded my Sila well. You have this joy in you, and joy leads to rapture. Rapture, means you have goosebumps in you. I feel very happy that I'm so impeccable in my Sila. And rapture leads to serenity. Because once this rapture goes away, then you feel very serene, very calm. And this serenity leads to what? Leads to pleasure, happiness, joy, happiness. And pleasure itself, it leads to what? Pleasure actually leads to samadhi, which is actually here is this concentration, but actually it's actually you're samadhi. Means you're able to focus. Being able to focus well. Being able to place your mind's attention easily. Anything you want. It's actually samadhi. Of course, it's not so much concentration on a single object, but it is actually samadhi. And samadhi leads to what? Samadhi leads to knowledge and vision. And knowledge and vision actually leads to what? Wisdom. And and wisdom, it leads to disenchantment. And disenchantment leads to what? Dispassion. And dispassion leads to what? Knowledge and vision. Of release. Of liberation. And the Buddha says, in this way, Ananda. Sila leads step by step to the consummation of arahantship. You see, this is what the Buddha already told Varamananda. Sila leads step by step to the consummation of arahantship. So, if you want to actually get out of samsara, you must have Sila as the building block. Otherwise, you're actually going to be mired in samsara for the longest time, going round and round. And you see here. Again, this SN 47.21, again, this venerable Ananda, told this venerable Bada, same thing also. You see, the wholesome virtues, the Sila spoken by the Blessed One. This venerable Bada actually asked, what's the purpose of the Buddha, teaching about virtue or Sila? What is the purpose of Buddha teaching about Sila? You see, then this venerable Ananda says, actually, the wholesome virtue spoken by the Blessed One is actually for the purpose of developing what? The 4 establishments of mindfulness, which is your satipatthana, your mindfulness of your body, feelings, the mind, and the phenomena, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you want to practice the satipatthana, you must have wholesome virtues in you, as the building block. Only then you'll be able to practice this 4 satipatthana. So you see how important it is. Okay, and of course this 5.168 again, Venerable Sariputta actually talks about the importance of Sila. It's like this Venerable Sariputta says Sila is just like the branches and the leaves of a tree. Without that, there can never be any tree, in any spiritual life. So you see, the next thing also I just want to also share with you. Okay, we know that observing Sila is very important, but the next question is, how do you ensure you observe your Sila well? That's the next question, Because most people would think that, observing Sila, is just making sure you restrain yourself, whenever whenever you feel like killing something, or stealing something, just make sure you don't do it, Very simple. That's actually making sure you observe, make sure you are mindful of your body, Some people actually have this notion that observing Sila is just making sure you observe and restrain your body, But actually, you see, to observe your Sila well, you must actually watch your mind. That's what the Buddha says, you know. And you see that in AN 3.105, you know, the Buddha actually gives an example of this roof, this house that has actually got a pig roof, you know, this house, it's got a pig roof. You know, if the roof is not thatched properly and the roof is unprotected, whenever there's a heavy rain, the beams of the house become unprotected, you know, and the walls also are unprotected, and, you know, and what happens is during a rainfall, you know, the beams become very wet and soggy, you know, and the walls, you know, and the floors, and the entire building becomes wet and soggy. Why? Because the roof is not properly thatched, it's not properly built, you know, and there's actually there's actually leakages, you know, on the roof. So it's not properly guarded, you know. The roof is not properly guarded. So the Buddha says, in the same way, you know, householder, when the mind, you know, our mind is unprotected, you don't safeguard your mind well, then also your actions by body, speech, and mind are also unprotected as well, you know. And when your body, speech, and mind actions are unprotected, you know, your actions by body, speech, and mind become soggy, you know. And when they become soggy, they become, you know, and the actions are actually rot, you know. And when your actions by body, speech, and mind rot, then one's death is not auspicious. The mode of one's death is not good. Then you will not have a good death, you know. So because of what? Because everything originates from the mind, you see. The Buddha says in Dhammapada verse 1, right, you know, everything is mind, you know, by mind is all made, you know. So if you want to protect your, safeguard your Sila well, the first thing is you must actually guard your mind. Watch your mind, you know, watch your mind, that's very important, you know. And you can see that from SN 35.152, this Ati Yuko Pariyaya Sutta, right. The Buddha actually says, if you are able to watch your mind, it means you watch your mind every day, you know. It means you watch your mind, you know, whether anything unwholesome arises in you, whether there's loba, dosa, moha arises in you. If you can just do that, you know, and make the effort to actually abandon this through all the techniques that the Buddha has actually taught, then you are actually capable of achieving arahantship, you know, arahantship even in this lifetime itself, you know. You don't even have to wait until the next life. And the Buddha says if you can do that just by watching the mind, you know. So I know some Buddhist traditions actually don't encourage, you know, watching the mind. You know. They say that, oh, watching the mind is actually only for anagamis, you know, and not for putujanas. You see, but if you read the suttas, you know, the Buddha didn't say that, you know. The Buddha says you must watch your mind at all times, you know. It's just like the pig roof, just like the pig roof just now, you know. You must make sure that your roof is properly thatched, you know. Your mind, so that there's no leakage in your mind, you know. You must watch it all the time. Because if you actually don't watch and you let the loba, dosa, moha take control of you, then you're going to respond negatively, right? You're going to steal, you're going to kill, you're going to have sexual misconduct because of lust, you know, and you're going to, you know, speak falsehood. You're going to start, you know, speaking slanderous speech, you know. Why? Because of what? Because of loba, dosa, moha, you know. So that's why the Buddha says that you must actually watch your mind. You know? The first thing to guard your sila, you must actually safeguard your mind, just like the roof of this house. Make sure you guard it well, you know, so that it doesn't become soggy and rot. So that's why in Satipatthana, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, in this MN10, you find that the Buddha actually talks about this Citta Nupassana, you know, contemplating mind in the mind. You know. So the Buddha says, you know, as a foundation of mindfulness, this Citta Nupassana means what? You must actually contemplate, you know, the mind, you know, whether anything unwholesome arises, is there loba, dosa, moha? If there's loba, dosa, moha, make sure, you know, you actually abandon them straight away, you know, by using right effort and through the techniques, you know, that the Buddha has taught. You know. So that's how important it is if you want to safeguard, you know. And how do you actually safeguard? Watch your mind, you know. How do you say watch your mind is important, but how do you watch your mind? So you can refer to AN 4.14 in terms of restraint. The Buddha says you can watch your mind by what? By actually exercising restraint. And how do you restrain yourself? It's actually when you actually place your mindfulness on your six sense doors, right? When you put your mindfulness on the six sense doors, then you'll be able to know how your mind reacts, you know, to the external sense object. Because if you are not in the present and you do not actually put your mindfulness in these six sense doors, then you are not able to exercise restraint, you know. So that's why the Buddha says, you know, to actually watch your mind, you must have your mindfulness anchored, you know, in the six sense doors. You know, that's where you can actually do, exercise restraint. What the Buddha calls Indra Samvara, you know. is actually this restraint of the senses, where you stop yourself from doing something, You stop yourself from doing something, and you don't do it, So it's something like, you stop yourself in time, and you don't want to do it, because before you utter harsh speech or utter anything unwholesome, you restrain yourself, But of course, restraint is actually just temporary, How do you actually ensure, that this loba dosa maha is eradicated, So to do this, you must have what? You must do mental cultivation, which is bhavana, which is actually what we call sampajanya, Sati is important for you to suppress, to contain, to restrain yourself. But if you want to actually eradicate, and uproot the loba dosa moha, you must have sampajanya. And how do you do this sampajanya? Okay, you can refer that to this SN 35.13, which actually records how the Buddha practiced under the Bodhi tree. When the Buddha on the night of enlightenment, when he was still a bodhisattva, he was actually contemplating, he was actually trying to find the ultimate nature of existence. You see, the Buddha actually contemplated what? Contemplated the 6 sense doors, He contemplated the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. You see? So, and of course, the Buddha was actually doing anapanasati at the time, as what we can see from the sutta. But he was also contemplating the 6 sense doors, and he was actually looking at what is the pleasure, and the gratification, the gratification and the danger and escape for the 6 sense bases, So to actually uproot this loba dosa moha, you must see the danger, of this this pleasure, this kilesa, right? This danger, of at the 6 sense doors, you must actually see what? You must actually see loba dosa moha, because the danger in any sensual pleasure, the danger is what? The danger is because it's actually because of what? It is anicca, dukkha, anatta, Only then you are able to contemplate, to eradicate the loba dosa moha at the 6 sense doors. So restraint is sati, but you must also have sampajanya, by actually contemplating the 6 sense doors, by looking at the danger, of the kilesas, by contemplating, anicca, dukkha, and anatta, But of course, how do you actually contemplate this anicca, dukkha, anatta at the 6 sense basis, Then you refer to SN 22.122, where you actually, Buddha says, to contemplate anicca, dukkha, anatta at the 6 sense doors, you must contemplate the 5 aggregates, The 5 aggregates, must be contemplated at the 6 sense basis by looking at what? How your form, your feelings, your perceptions, your volitional formations, and your consciousness arise at the 5 sense basis. Whenever the 5 sense base comes to contact with the sense object, how you react to it, you check how your 5 aggregates arise through causes and conditions. You must see how the 5 aggregates arise dependently they are dependently arisen through causes and conditions. And that's why in SN 22.122, Venerable Sariputta said that if you are able to contemplate these 5 aggregates, then you are actually capable of realizing, sotapatti, stream entry. If you actually do this, continuously, if you contemplate the 5 aggregates, just like what the Buddha actually tells Rohitasa in this AN 4.45, this Rohitasa was actually a Dewa, but before he became a Dewa, he was actually an ascetic that had got this wonderful psychic power, that he wanted to travel, to a far away place, he traveled very long distances in the universe, to find a place where nobody grows old and dies. So the Buddha says that you can never find such a place in the universe where nobody grows old and dies. This Rohitasa actually traveled long distances, all to the far corners of the universe, just to find this place. But then he died along the way, and then he became a Dewa. So after he died, this Dewa came back to see the Buddha and said, Bhante, can you please answer the question or not? Is there a place in the universe where nobody grows old and dies? The Buddha says, no, there's no such a place, but there's one place you can contemplate, which is this 6 foot long body, 1 fathom long body. If you contemplate it, you'll be able to achieve, this place, where nobody grows old and dies, which is Nibbana. So that's why these 5 aggregates is actually very, very important, if you want to actually get out of samsara. The Buddha says, you need to contemplate the 6 sense doors, and also contemplate the 5 aggregates through the 6 sense doors. So how do you contemplate this, integrate the 5 aggregates with the six sense doors. You can actually look at Adman 148, where the Buddha talks about this Chachaka Sutta, with the 6 sets of 6. So the Buddha says that whenever you actually come into contact with the sense object, for example, you look at something very tantalizing, like a plate of really delicious food, then you actually look at yourself, contemplate, for example, oh, greed has arisen in me, or lust has arisen in me. Then how does it happen? Or you contemplate, oh, this happens because of the pleasant feeling that's arisen in me. And how does this pleasant feeling? Oh, it's because of this thought, oh, I want, this is a nice plate of food, spaghetti or whatever. And how does this thought arise? Or because of perception. And how does perception arise? Or because of this contact. And how does contact happen? Or because of the eye consciousness. And how does eye consciousness happen? Or it's because of the eye base getting in contact with the form, which is actually the plate of delicious food. So if you contemplate it in this way, you're actually contemplating the 5 aggregates through the 6 sense doors. You see, when you look at the greed or the lust, right, that is a sankhara. When you look at the feelings, that pleasant feeling arises, that's a feeling. If you actually look at the thought, it's the sankhara, and then the perception of the food is actually perception. Then the contact, and then you also come into contact with you also contemplate the consciousness, the eye consciousness, and also the form, the eye base together with the plate of food. So from here, the 5 aggregates, actually are being contemplated through each of the 6 sense doors. So this is actually what the Buddha actually highlights in this MN 148, which is how you should actually contemplate. And this is also similar to this MN 146, where this Venerable Nandaka, he actually taught the nuns, how to actually contemplate non-self. I'm sure you know this. I've actually spoken about this before. When you look at, for example, this flame, and you light up a flame, right? Using an oil lamp. Then the Buddha asks you to consider, is this flame, is it actually, does it actually is it independently arisen or not? Can you say that this flame can be there without any conditions? So it's impossible, right? Because the flame is there because of what? Because of the wick and because of the oil, right? So if the wick and the oil actually disappear and impermanent, so the flame itself also disappears. So you cannot say that this flame has got atta. It doesn't have a self. But it is non-self because it's dependently arisen. It arises through causes and conditions, and if any of the conditions change, then this flame also disappears and extinguishes. So it's empty of a self. So that's why the Buddha says it's sunyata. It's empty. There's no self to it. So you cannot actually say that this flame can be there independently. Means the flame is just there, without any conditions, without any oil, without any wick. So it's impossible. So the same goes for a shadow. A shadow is formed by a tree. But can you say that a shadow is there without conditions? You cannot say, because the shadow is there because of the sun and because of the tree trunk. But if you remove the tree and the sun, the shadow also disappears. So can you say that the shadow actually has a self? No, the Buddha says there's no self. So that's why the Buddha says everything is actually non-self. Sabbe satta anatta. Okay, so in conclusion, just want to highlight to you this observing the Sila itself. It's we need to we need to actually be aware, what the Buddha actually says in terms of observing the 5 precepts, and also in terms of observing the 8 precepts, and also make sure that we also observe the 10. Make sure that we don't commit any of the 10 ducharita, which is the unwholesome actions. And also make sure that we actually remind ourselves that observing this Sila alone is not just sufficient, that we don't stop short at just observing Sila, that we must also make sure that we watch our mind in order for us to actually observe the Sila more impeccably and more assiduously, through placing our mindfulness on the 6 sense doors, and also being aware, of what arises in our mind, through watching our mind at all times. Then through that, slowly and incrementally, we will be able to develop, ourselves spiritually, so that we can actually slowly, and surely, we can strive towards achieve Sotapatti, and then slowly, through this observing this Sila, we'll be able to cultivate ourselves spiritually, and try to, develop ourselves spiritually in the area of samsara, slowly, but surely.